You want, well, you know how we usually do it, we just do it by the item order? You good with that? I mean, I'd like to just do it that way, so. No, you can leave, no, go. That's what I'm telling you,
You have
can
time
go.
to run to the restroom.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to tell you, if you're good. All right. We will do recognition of the public when we come up on the agenda items, and they'll let us know when it's time, so that way we can just like we usually do. All right, entertain a motion for approval of the minutes. Got a motion by Mr. Foster, a second by Mr. Gamenden. Sounds good. All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, sounds even better. A report of the Budget Committee Chairman. No report. Not enough. All right. The transit lines, let me tell you that one real quick. That was the $3,500 that the Ford Sumner usually always paid. We were trying to pull them out, and they were going to do their own job as a nonprofit. Then we decided back in the workshops to not do any new nonprofits. Well, they got left out, so they didn't get paid by Ford Sumner. I'm just asking, entertain a motion that, or I'll make the motion that we pay Transit Alliance. I've already talked to Jimmy. He said they'll pick it up again next year. So they'll just include it. So, okay, thanks. Any discussion on that? Oh, yeah, thank you.
Jerry, you want to explain that?
Okay. For the Transit Alliance, Jerry?
So they're new, they got.
No, they wanted to be a new nonprofit, so we pulled them out of Jimmy's. Jimmy usually pays them. So Ford Sumner usually pays it. So we pulled them out to do their own new nonprofit by themselves. Well, the problem was we decided, I don't know, maybe the next week when we got to the budget workshop, whichever one it was, we started addressing that we weren't going to do any new nonprofits. Well, we had already pulled them out and didn't put them back in anywhere, so they never got paid. So they weren't in the budget anywhere, and that's the $3,500 for our membership in the Transit Alliance, which gives us a seat at the table for all the TDOT money, like it going to 6 lanes of Vietnam veterans or 7, or depending on how you look at it. So it's a cheap investment that we've always done, we need to keep doing. This year we just need to pay it out of the general fund. I've already talked to Mr. Johnson. He said he will gladly put it back in his next year. So when he comes around, it'll be included in the spring.
His 100,000 stayed at 100,000.
Yeah, his stayed at 100,000. It was just something he had always done.
So that was essentially a $3,500 increase with this being pulled out.
Yeah, because the way it got pulled out, and just on paper, yeah, it messed it up. But that's why he said he'll gladly take it back. He didn't think about it either, because he said usually he's paid it for the past 5 years that I can think of. So, any more? Everybody in favor? Any opposed? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I know y'all are tired.
Sorry.
Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. And hey, do y'all want to just have the same meeting dates as legislative was doing for October and November? Because it's a holiday, both of the second Mondays. And they were just going to meet that next Tuesday. So, like on October 15th, we'd be on October 15th at 6 and November 12th at 6. It's 2 Tuesdays. And if as long as we've got quorum, we're good. I understand that Tuesday is a different day than Monday. And I don't mean that sarcastically.
Second.
All right.
What are those 2 days?
Tuesday, October 15th at 6, and then Tuesday, November 12th at 6.
It's the second Tuesday of every month. Yeah, because it's 2 holidays that got us in a row. All right, I heard a motion in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Sounds good. Thank you, Ms. Shell. I appreciate that one. Don't see Anthony, so we will skip the county mayor. David?
No report, just the memo.
All right, old business. These are, a lot of this stuff is stuff that we had to keep putting off because we had to keep putting off the budget because it hadn't been passed. So it's all things that have been discussed several times on our committee. I would entertain a motion to group and approve.
So moved.
If David's
Second.
okay with that. Old business.
Yeah, I'm 1, 2, 3.
Old business.
Old
Old
business
business.
1 through 6. It's all things we've talked about. It's just we had to keep putting it off for 2 months.
I don't think the one for the sound system was ever discussed. That's the one that I think you guys want additional information on it.
Okay, they didn't get back with us on that one then?
No, I think
Okay, let's,
I asked Mr. Carey and he recommends that we redo it or that we have Mr. Moniz that did the original quotes come in, so.
okay, so
Either way
just,
you want to do it.
all right, then, motion to approve 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6, with 5 being put off until next month?
I don't think we have all the stuff for the resource officers grants neither.
Actually, what Sonny asked on the, one for the resource officers, we'll approve that money if we can get a unanimous vote tonight. He's ready to start hiring those people. On the grant, it's just whichever money comes in, we're gonna funnel that towards the equipment. We haven't gotten the information on it yet, but that way, pending getting the information, we can go forward, because he's ready to start hiring.
So we just need to do a resolution to amend for the property tax in the general fund, the salaries, and the trustees commission. So we'll
Yeah.
work that up if that's what you guys
Mhm.
want. We'll bring it to the full commission for this.
Yep, is everybody comfortable with that? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, roll on. New business?
Mr. Chairman,
Go
make a
ahead, sir.
motion to, number one, budget amendments for education. We went through education, it was unanimous. So moved.
Second.
All right, Jessica, did you get both those? All right, any discussion? I didn't think so, it's a little hot. All in favor? Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
What was your motion for the sound system? Sorry.
To put it off until next month, David, when we have
Do
a
we
better.
want to drop Mr. Moniz or just have Mr. Carey redo
Dennis,
it?
can you let us know what you think is the best thing on that one?
Excuse me?
It's Judge Gray's sound system. If we need to, who'd you say, David?
Well, we got a quote from Mr. Moniz, but we didn't have enough information. We don't know if we need to ask him to come to here or have Mr. Dennis to re-look at it, either one.
I recommended that Mr. Moniz join us for that one, mostly because the document they provided said that some of the equipment would not be replaced. My question is the equipment that's there that's not being replaced shielded well enough to exclude RF interference? The electrical outlets as well, we don't know if the EM interference has been checked on those as well. So before we move forward, I'd like to have those two items at least confirmed.
So we can send him, we'll get Mr. Browning and send him an email and see if he can come to the next meeting. Yeah,
And that's why we're putting it off for the month then.
Yeah, because I think there were some questions.
Is that all
that
you had,
came in
Rick?
late too.
Get out of here. Thanks.
Say it again, Al.
Yeah, he's done now. All right, new business education, number 2 is information only. B, go ahead, David, if you want to hit on some of the highlights for it.
Number one's just carryovers that's already been approved before in the general fund. We do them every year. It's leftover appropriations that we need to spend for projects that continue on.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any no's? All right, we're good to go. Second one,
Insurance, it's an insurance recovery. They want to use it for the repair of the jail. It's from the Comfort Group.
So moved. Second.
any discussion? Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Number 3 is for the Millersville Library. It's an agreement with the city of Millersville. They're wanting them, if you look at the contract, to do, I think it's called their community center that's right in front of
They're gonna
them.
run it for them.
Hire a part-time employee and they're going to reimburse us. It'll be passed through.
Motion.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
The motion was Mr. Foster, second was Mr. Commendon. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Sounds good.
The next item is the items that was discussed at the county commission for the projects that were funded. And the first one I have a handout, it's to do with the jail module, parking garage, and justice center that was discussed and approved by Gen Ops. And these are the first 2 pages would actually be the amendments necessary for this year to fund it, and I'll be happy to discuss them once we pass it.
And what we were gonna ask is even if it was unanimous, that we not pass it this first month. That way it gives JPA time to make sure they can be here in October. Because we don't know if they could be here on such short notice in September for the September meeting.
Since there were some questions, I'll be more than happy to explain the funding of how it all shook out. The first page, it just shows $3,487,522. That's being transferred from the debt service from committed funds. We interchange funds in our debt service to capital every year to kind of keep our long-term capital improvements, so it is within the total. The next page gives you the breakdown. If you look at page 2, on the left is the 2.3 million additional 4 cents. The 880 is the amount that was reserved by the 1.5 cents being moved. It's the same $3.4 million coming in on the left side to show you your funding, and then on the right side it just shows the trustees commission and the different portions that were approved tonight, which was the $5 million for the jail modules, the $577.5 for the uplift, $125 for demolition, $450 for the full architectural for the garage, and the $500,000 contingency to make the 2 balance. And that's that on project A.
Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Jerry. Jerry Foster first, then I got Jerry Becker next.
David, I thought the increase in the jail pod was $3 million. This is $3,487,000. Is there?
It was the original pod was 2, and the estimate it ended up being $5 million. It was a $3 million increase.
Yeah, but this says $3,487,000.
Where we seeing? No. Look on the right side. These are the funding sources here.
I'm looking at this first resolution here. It says funds to transfer capital projects for additional jail modules.
Right, that's the amount to be transferred from the debt service fund to cover the addition on the jail modules and the $500,000 contingency.
For,
The 47 is the $500,000.
Yeah, it makes the 2 makes about 3.5 million.
I got you.
And then it flows into the next page just to show where it's
got you.
transferred in.
I'm with you now.
I wouldn't give you a question. I was looking
Okay,
at page 2.
got you now.
Jerry, Mr. Becker.
This one's, I'm trying to compare it on here. So the 6.7 on this page is the 1.3 minus the 2020, 2021, 22 lease costs.
Oh, you're talking to the slides they passed out?
Okay.
Yes, sir. I've got a reconciliation too.
Okay.
So, and the only thing that's not on there, what exact, what's in the trustees commission?
When we did the budget, the 4 cents property tax was not put in and the 1.5 cents was transferred. There's a 2% trustees commission on all property taxes. So we approve the property taxes anytime you have an offsetting commission on it. So that's the commission on the additional property tax revenue. And then when you go down through there, the only other thing that will really vary from what JPA showed you for tonight is the lease has already been budgeted in the general fund, so you won't have to worry about that. And the actual architectural was broke over 2 years, but we put it all in this year because once you drop the PO, you're going to need all your funding. But if you look back at those items, that's the only thing that should vary besides that trustees commission. If that makes sense, Mr. Baker.
So nothing on this page we're voting right now includes the jail pod addition.
Yes, sir. It's the second one down on the right. It's the $5 million on page 2. Yes, if you go down, the first one's the trustees commission, the second one's the full jail pod. So the full jail pod will be funded this morning or tonight if it's approved to allow full haste moving forward.
And if we want to pass it with one reading but put it on the October agenda, we can. Unless we just want to have it on here a second time, under old business.
So it won't be on September 4th.
No, they don't think they can get JPA back in time, so.
I wasn't sure if it would pass unanimously or not on budget, and so for planning purposes, I just asked that we put it onto October's agenda, and that way that would give them plenty of time to make travel arrangements.
Do you want to just, if you vote it that way, just want to put it up under old business 6 months for your second vote?
Motion approved as submitted, finance director for October meeting.
I'm going to get Kevin in just a second. Kevin, did you want to talk about the jail and all that stuff or everything? Okay. I'm sorry.
Motion.
You've got a motion by Mr. Good, second by Mr. Gamenden. All right, Kevin, now you're good.
All right, Kevin Baker, 424 A.B. Wade Road. First of all, I wish JPA were here. I wish they could hear some of my comments. I thought it was a fairly good presentation, but I was kind of surprised when we had a contractor say, if you build it, they will come. About criminals? Is that the message we want to send? But more importantly, doesn't anybody read the newspaper? President Trump's First Step Act about criminal justice reform? We're supposed to be trying to cut down on the number of people we incarcerate. And yet this man said, oh, we can always find more people to incarcerate. that didn't surprise anybody or shock anybody here? It shocked me. Governor Bill Lee, one of his first initiatives is talking about criminal justice reform. And we're talking about, well, we could find more people to incarcerate. I mean, but good discussions. I think I'm looking forward to hearing more about the pass-through of our jail system, of how many state inmates we actually take in, and what the return on investment is, and what the population on an ongoing basis is. Because basically we're building more jail space to accommodate what? More state inmates? And yet the governor is talking about reducing the number of inmates? The president's talking about reducing the number of inmates? It just kind of blows my mind. But also I didn't hear anybody talk in Gen Ops about shoring up the existing jail and what we're going to do to mitigate any kind of geological issues with that area, with things sinking. We're going to build pods over there, and we have a problem with a jail that's already sinking. We're going to build more right adjacent to it. It just, I'm not sure, what's going on here. But anyhow, so I also look forward to hearing about what kind of swap this is going to be with First Baptist Church. The last swap, if you ask me, wasn't a great financial success, but we'll see how this one goes. I haven't heard any more about talking about the ongoing expenses of the jail, of moving prisoners back and forth. What's the capital cost going to be? What's the ongoing labor cost going to be? How many more people, sheriffs, are we going to need to facilitate this? How many buses are we going to need to facilitate this? I don't know. I guess that covers it for now. Like I said, I think it was a good dialogue, but I was really shocked that nobody said anything to the guy from JPA about if you build it, they will come, talking about inmates. I don't think that's what we want people thinking of Sumner County as. That you'll build a new jail so they'll come? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right, see any more questions or discussion? Mr. Gimenez, I apologize. You go right ahead, sir.
I do have a comment.
Yes, sir.
And, I kind of agree with Mr. Baggert. I do wish that some way we could have a society adjustment, then we wouldn't need any of this. It would be great if we could. Evidently, none of us have figured out how to do that. But that's all.
Mr. Becker?
So the additional $3 million or whatnot for the second jail pod and the tower, how's that? I mean, I guess that's in here. I'm just trying to, in my mind, so was this already, I may have already asked that, answer that earlier, so I apologize. So is this already, this reallocation or whatever, already planned when the presentation for the tax rate was provided?
Oh, absolutely. That was one of the things. We'd planned on paying for it outright. The transition fees, the $570,000 out of pocket. We were trying to pay for the $150,000 out of pocket. And when it came up that we need to speed up the jail pod and then the parking garage, we realized that there was no way we could do it out of pocket. So
the $5 million price tag was known.
Not the full $5 million. I think the price tag we had originally, Jerry, was I think $3 million. I'm trying to remember right there. It was $2 million for the jail pod and $500,000 more for the parking garage because I think it was just going to be the plans for it is all they could get done in the next calendar year. So it was like $2.5 million, maybe $3 million because there was something else too.
It's a difference of, it came back a difference of about 3.5 because
Yeah.
of the jail pod, which came from debt service fund. That's the $3.5 million transfer.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Mr. Becker, where it changed from the original $2 million to the $3 million was 2 weeks ago. We had a meeting with the sheriff, TCI, our design team, and myself that all met, and that's where we figured out he needs 3 separate quarters. The one that we were talking about earlier with the females, and then the juvenile male and the juvenile female. Which, if we took our original pod and tried to cookie cutter that to accommodate all 3 of those, then it was eating up the cost that we couldn't do it for 2 million. So that's where I said, all right, we're going back to the drawing board. We've got our contractor on board next week, and we're gonna start over and talk to the sheriff and try to figure out how to do 2 pods, dormitory style, so they could pull more off of there. So that just came within the last 2 weeks.
And that's fine, I appreciate that background.
To answer his question, I think the answer is,
I guess where I'm trying to understand better is, you know, when we voted on the tax rate, there was discussion about additional pennies and so forth. If I'm thinking and hearing everyone correctly, this is now $2.5 to $3 million more than what we had thought of during the tax rate discussion. If that's correct, I'm trying to understand where the funding for that $2.5 to $3 million is coming from, and is that going to impact, what will that impact elsewhere?
if you look at the transfer, Mr. Becker, the 2.3 is the additional property taxes, and the 880 is the 1.5 cents that was moved from debt service to capital. Your debt service fund has a healthy fund balance, but it's subject to, it's got sales tax in it, interest, and other things that are subject to the economy, so we try to keep a pretty healthy fund balance. When you look at your fund balance now, if you drain this for 3.4, you're still going to be in a healthy range. So when the jail pods came back 3 million more than the 500,000 for contingency, 3.4, almost 3.5 was transferred from your debt service to make the difference.
Okay, so the transfer from debt service was, I'm rounding up, it was basically the 487, but now it's 3,487,000.
It was originally zero. The original was your 2,348 and your 880 covered these projects. They came in about 3.5 million more, the 300,000 for, $3 million for the pod that came from $2 million to 5. And then JPA wanted to go ahead and bring $500,000 of the contingency money onto the forefront because things were kind of in flux at this point, which kicked it up $3.5 million. So the 3.5 is being transferred from your debt.
Yeah. The money we had to, it was money that we could have tapped, Jerry, but we've never wanted to tap into, only because that fund is supported by a lot of very flexible revenue streams. By that we mean sales tax, collections, some other things. So if we have a downturn, that fund dumps really fast. So we try and keep it higher than some of the other funds. David was willing, we could do it one time to do this. It's not something we ever need to try and do again, or at least not for about 10 more years, until we get it built back up to where we're real comfortable with it again. Only because the volatility of all the feeding funds. Does that make sense? It's something it's not an option we ever wanted to have to do, but Sonny has to have it. We can't keep going with the jail being overcrowded, so there's not really an option. In retrospect, it wasn't up 4 pennies wasn't nearly enough money, but we're going to make what we can.
I mean, I need some more clarification. I won't vote no tonight because I don't
Okay.
really understand. To me, I guess got a lot more questions.
Well, if we have any other questions,
Basically, we have $20 million at the end of the year in your debt service. The reason you need a large balance in your debt service is because you have adequate facilities tax, very subject to the economy, interest, and sales tax. Your property tax, not so much so, but they are a large portion, so you want to keep somewhere around that 20 million mark. After this adjustment, next year, we project at the end of the year, before you issue your bonds, you'll be somewhere around $20 million still.
we'll be able
So
to
you're
build
still
back.
in the green. You wouldn't want to go.
It's not something we want to do every
16,
year.
18.
I mean, it's once in a blue moon we can get away with it. For the jail overcrowding is why it justifies finagling some stuff in a way that I wouldn't do this for just something that we didn't have to have.
We did the same thing to complete Burris back when that bond was issued. We issued a bond for Burris, for the Burris Elementary School, and then when the school was virtually complete, we transferred, I believe, around $3 million out of debt service at that time. So this is something that happens, you use your debt service and your capital fund together to cover your capital projects. If we hadn't had a healthy fund balance in the capital projects fund, it would have probably postponed the jail pod.
Yes.
Which isn't very advantageous with the overcrowding, but it would have postponed it to next year.
What would that potentially impact? What scenario where we would need to use that money for others?
It gives you less of a cushion because you've got
We're okay right now.
Debt service that has fixed outgoing costs, and then you have a debt service fund with variable incoming costs. The larger your fund balance, the larger your cushion. You want to keep it as large as reasonable. The $20 million mark's reasonable, probably 18, 16, but you wouldn't want to keep bringing it down. It's not, wouldn't be a good idea. Because you know the economy can change at any time.
So bringing this 3.5 out on a one-time basis, does it recoup itself, or is it just gone forever?
It's going to, we're going to have about $20 million this year. Next year, we'll have about $20 million. It's going to about break. That's all you can take out of the fund. We'll start
But
actually.
in theory, next year, we would potentially have 23.5.
Yeah, we would have more.
We would have had
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
about $24 million next year if we had it done.
Mhm.
But we're going to have about 20. And then next year, you know, moving the 4 cents back and the penny and a half is the time you're looking to issue the bonds for the courthouse. So you're going to have plenty of actual stream for that. You're not going to be using fund balance.
So that's.
The issuance of the bond for these actual projects, we do not anticipate using fund balance. You'll just have revenue to expenditures direct.
We'll be okay.
$1 million from state.
And that's why we're paying for this outright rather than issuing a bond for it. That was the whole goal, was to pay for this outright, so that way, when we issued the bond, we wouldn't have two-time bond costs and everything else associated with it for a little bitty bond and then a big bond. That wouldn't have made any sense.
Every time you issue a bond, you got to get rated, pay the bond issuance cost, and there's several $100,000 worth of cost involved.
So,
Do we know, going back to the pot, do we know, and I'm all about, planning ahead. Do we know, instead of building the 2 pods right now for $5 million, the 2 pods in the surveillance tower or whatever, for $5 million, what the cost might be if we did the 1 pod in the surveillance, plus if we turn on the second pod next year or whatever?
well, the problem is that doesn't help him. He's got to have two because they have such a, it's not one particular part of the jail population that's overcrowded, it's the whole thing. So they've got females that are getting ready to be overcrowded. They've got males that are getting ready to be overcrowded. They've got male juveniles being held as adults that are overcrowded. So you could have one pod, yeah, one pod doesn't fix it. You still, the example, you move all the females out there. Well, now you're still overcrowded. It's just not with females. It's going to be something else. So that they have to have 2 pods, and that's why we had to go to the extremes we did to make sure we paid for it, because we're at that point with them.
And it saves thousands.
Comment on that, though, we paid these people a whole lot of money to put this plan out for us, and it is confusing to me why all of a sudden we absolutely need all this stuff when, we paid them a lot of money and they didn't see the need for it. And I know it wasn't in the original scope, but he even said that they looked at the forecasting and needed immediate, and it just, here we are.
Well, Jerry, we had to do it because Gallatin wasn't going to pay any money.
Do what?
Gallatin was not going to pay any money if we didn't do the parking garage this year.
I'm not talking about parking garage.
I know, but I'm saying, you're asking about the money and the forecasting. They put the parking garage way down at the end because we never want to address it. And the jail part we didn't pay for, they did on their own to help us out, and that was 2 years ago. The jail population has changed quite a bit in 2 years. It's fluctuated a lot. In the instance of time, I know Jerry's going to vote no. Do we have any other questions that will pertain to the issue at hand? I'll be glad to talk with you afterwards, but it's getting late and there's no heat. If not, I'll take a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, so it'll go to a second reading for sure next month. Next one is going to be Highway Department needs. Miss Judy's here. What that's going to be is that's taking her money. David's, actually, go ahead, buddy. You're going to be better at it.
I've talked to Ms. Harden today, and she wanted the money just like was originally discussed at the commission meeting for equipment. If you look at page 3, this just budgets the property tax, the offsetting commission, and the rest of it into highway equipment and the capital projects fund.
So moved.
Second.
All right, got a motion by Mr. Foster, second by Ms. Shell.
Can we do one reading since it was actually vetted at the full commission?
And that's what I would ask. If unless somebody's opposed to it, we'd like to make the amendment that we get it done so Ms. Judy can get her stuff this month. You good, Ms. Judy? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Ms. Judy. Have a good night, ma'am.
Item C is the school resource officers, and I believe when we talked to the sheriff, he was needing the sergeant and the 15 officers.
No, Aaron. SRO stuff. Question or two.
I believe it was a sergeant and 15 officers total? Was it a sergeant? So if you direct me, because I think you wanted it to go into the commission this month, I'll budget the property tax, the offsetting commission, the 1 sergeant, the estimated benefits, and the 15 officers. I think it was 15, or we'll go count them.
And then what we're gonna do is whatever we get as far as the grant, we know that's gonna be later on down the road. That's what they're gonna use to turn around and try and equip everybody with.
So moved.
Second.
Jerry?
I'm sorry, what page are we on?
That one, we did not anticipate sending forward tonight's talking to Mr. Taylor, so we don't have a transfer made up.
Do we, how much are we on?
It was the money for the school resource officers. It was
No,
one.
yeah, I know the topic about it, like, what are we voting on?
What we're voting on is to allocate those 2 pennies to move them over to Sonny's budget so he can turn around and hire the people, with the idea that he's not gonna have the money for the equipment, that'll come in later, and so he's gonna have to make that work for right now.
So, but don't we need something to vote on?
That's why I was gonna, since I don't have that with us tonight, we didn't anticipate discussing. I thought it was gonna go back actually to probably emergency services when we originally discussed it. What I'm saying is I can budget the projected revenue for the 2 cents, the offsetting trustees commission, the 15 officers, a sergeant, and the benefits. Because we had it worked up back at budget, I just don't have it with me.
I mean, I'm not opposed to doing this, I'm just trying to, I think.
The only reason was, and it's my fault, I didn't tell David because I didn't get with Sonny soon enough about it, that he's ready to hire now and he's got a list, so that's completely on me. But I'm asking that we approve it this time so it doesn't, my mistake doesn't hold up Sonny from hiring people that he needs to steal from Metro.
And honestly, I just didn't know what we were gonna do with the grant and the, which, you know, if it was a sergeant or lieutenant, thought it was going back to probably, emergency services to talk about the grant, but it sounds like that's been dealt with.
Yeah, good, Jerry.
One other just quick question. I know, Liquid Creek's not even started yet or whatever, but, was the 2 pennies included for the Liquid Creek, SROs?
No, it was not. Initially, it was suggested for 2.5 pennies, and then it would cover all of them. But we cut that back in budget to 2 pennies and said, we'll have to come up with the money in 3 years when the school opens, or 2 years.
If you
Go ahead,
consider
Dave.
in the minutes, instead of putting 15 officers, can we put the additional officers needed for each school? Because I don't know what the exact number is, and Aaron may know, but I
Okay.
think it's 15, wasn't it?
15 to fill every school with 1 SRO.
Right. Okay.
And there was a supervisor.
Sergeant, yep.
Sergeant.
16
Mhm.
head counts, so, and that's what the 2 pennies covered all 16.
That and the estimated benefits.
And the
That
best,
or estimated benefits, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
fringe, yeah. All right. Any other questions? Anybody got anything for Aaron? All right, cool. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And that does pass unanimously, so we can get the money, or it can go to the budget, or to big commission this, next week.
Motion to approve CA 280. Second.
Thank you, Justin. Any discussion? No. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right,
Motion to
Ms.
group
Denham,
approve.
Ms. Denham, we got anything on these tax refunds?
No, they're all okay.
All right, group, Ms. Shell had a motion to group and approve. I saw a second from Mr. Nipper. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Okay, one more motion. All right, works for me, gents.
I think there was,
And ladies.
I was gonna say, I think on number
Yeah, I'm sorry, buddy.
2, no,